Nobody needs me." The fat girl whispered on the cliff. Mountain Man grabbed her just in time. "Nobody needs you. Nobody ever will." Those were the last words Willow Morgan carried with her as she stood on the edge of the cliff. The wind tore at her dress and hair, dragging the cold straight through skin, flesh, and bone. Far below, the valley was a smear of shadow and rock, the river a thin silver knife cutting through it all. One step. That was all it would take. One step, and there would be no more shouting, no more fists, no more laughter every time the word fat was spat like a curse in her direction. Her mother was gone before she ever knew warmth. Her father had followed the bottle out of her life. What she had left was a house that did not want her, walls that echoed with, "You eat too much," and "No man will ever want that body," and "You're a burden, Willow, do you hear me? A burden." That morning, the plate had slipped from her hands. It shattered at her feet, but the sound that broke her was the laughter. "Look at you!" her stepmother sneered, voice thick with spite. "Too big to move right, too stupid to hold a plate. You should have never been born." Her stepbrother leaned back in his chair, boots propped on the table. "We'd all be better off if you just disappeared off a cliff somewhere." When Willow had finally stumbled out the door, bruises blooming under her sleeves, no one called after her. No one asked where she was going. No one cared. So she walked, up past the last tilled fields, past the crooked fences and the thin line of cottonwoods, higher, where the air grew thin and sharp, and the world fell away beneath her boots. She did not bring a coat. She did not bring bread or water. There was nothing in her hands, nothing in her pockets, nothing left in her future. Now, on the ridge of stone, her voice was barely a breath against the roar of the wind. "Nobody needs me," she whispered. "Nobody would even notice." Somewhere out there you can almost see her, a lone figure on the edge of the world, one heartbeat away from vanishing. And as you're listening to this, wherever you are, in a city apartment, a quiet bedroom, a night shift somewhere far from home, ask yourself, what would you say to her if she could hear you? Willow lifted one foot, toes hanging over the emptiness, and that was when a hand, large, calloused, desperate, closed around her wrist from behind. "Don't," a rough voice commanded. "Don't take that step." The hand gripping Willow's wrist was strong enough to stop her fall, yet gentle enough not to hurt her. She gasped, spinning around, heart slamming against her ribs. Standing behind her was a man she had never seen, broad-shouldered, tall as a pine, wrapped in a worn buckskin coat, his beard dark and wind-swept. He didn't let go until she stepped fully away from the edge. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice low, steady, and strangely calm for a man who had just stopped a stranger from leaping into a canyon. Willow shook her head, but the tremble in her breath gave her away. "No," she whispered, "but I was going to be." The man exhaled slowly, the relief visible in the set of his shoulders. "Then it's a good thing I got here when I did." Willow backed away, arms wrapped around her body. Why did you stop me? You don't even know me." The man studied her carefully, not staring, not judging, simply trying to understand. "My name is Matthias Cole," he said, "and I know what it looks like when someone has run out of reasons to stay alive." Willow stiffened. She didn't want him to look at her too closely, not at her red-rimmed eyes or trembling hands, not at the bruises she tried to hide beneath sleeves too thin for the weather, and definitely not at her body. soft and heavy in all the places her family despised. "You shouldn't be here," she muttered. "Neither should you," Matthias answered. He moved a little closer, but not enough to frighten her. His presence felt like a wall built to shield, not to corner. In the uneasy silence, the wind tugged at Willow's hair. For the first time, she noticed the man carried a hunting bow, a half-filled game bag, and a calmness that didn't match the wildness of the mountains around them. Matthias waited, letting her breathe. Then he nodded toward the valley. "Mind if I sit?" Willow blinked. "Here?" "Here," he said, lowering himself to the ground a few feet away. "Long walk up. I could use a rest." It was such a simple thing, a man sitting instead of interrogating, that it startled her. She didn't move at first, but slowly, cautiously, she sank to the ground too. The cliff was still behind her, but for now it wasn't calling. Matthias glanced at her hands. "They're shaking." Willow hid them quickly. "I'm fine." People who are fine don't stand on cliffs with their eyes closed. Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to her this gently, yet so honestly. He didn't pity her. He didn't sneer. He didn't flinch because of her size. He just spoke. He continued softly, "You look like you've been running from something." Willow's breath caught. "My family." Matthias nodded once, as if he expected that. "They hurt you." It wasn't a question. Willow stared at the ground. "Every day, words, hands, everything. They say I ruin their lives, that I'm a waste of air, that nobody would ever want someone like me." Matthias's jaw tightened, not in anger at her, but at something she couldn't see. "They're wrong." She looked up sharply, disbelief flickering in her eyes. Matthias kept his gaze steady. "Pain doesn't make you worthless. Cruelty doesn't make you unlovable. It just means you've lived around the wrong people." Willow's lip quivered. No one had ever told her that. No one had ever offered her even the remotest kindness without demanding something in return. But before she could answer, Matthias shifted slightly, gaze drifting to the horizon. "I came up here once," he said, voice quieter. "Same cliff, same wind, same thought you were having." Willow stared. "You?" Matthias nodded. 5 years ago. Lost my wife and son during the winter sickness. Woke up one morning and couldn't see any road forward, so I walked up here, ready to step off." "What stopped you?" she whispered. "A deer," he said simply. "A young one, standing just a few feet away. It didn't run. It just looked at me, like something was saying, 'Not yet, you're not done,' and then it walked away, slow as you please. I followed it back down the mountain, step by step, until I realized I still wanted to live." He looked at her then, really looked, and Willow felt seen for the first time in her life. "Today," Matthias said softly, "you were my dear." Willow's eyes filled with tears she couldn't hold back. He continued, "Nobody is meant to fight alone. Not me, not you, not any more." The wind softened around them, almost as if listening. Willow pressed her hands together, struggling for words. I don't know what to do now. I can't go back home." "You won't," Matthias said firmly. "Not with what they've done to you." She swallowed. "Then where am I supposed to go?" Matthias rose slowly and extended his hand, not demanding, not assuming, simply offering. "With me," he said, "just for now, until you're ready to decide your own life." Willow stared at his hand, at his steady eyes, at the first kindness she had known in years, and for the second time that afternoon she stepped away from the edge. Matthias didn't rush her. He stood still, hand offered, letting Willow decide whether to step toward life or away from it. When her trembling fingers finally brushed his palm, he didn't grip tightly. He simply steadied her, like someone guiding a fragile bird back into its nest. "Come on," he murmured. "The mountain gets colder after sundown." They walked slowly at first. Willow's legs felt wooden, as if every step risked breaking her in half. Matthias kept a respectful distance beside her, not too close to overwhelm her, not too far to leave her feeling alone again. Below them, the valley stretched wide and quiet, filled with long shadows and the fading gold of afternoon. Willow had always been too busy running from pain to notice beauty. Now, for the first time, she saw how the sunlight softened the granite walls, how the pines swayed like guardians, how the river hummed a lullaby far below. "Are you cold?" Matthias asked. She shook her head, but a shiver betrayed her. He didn't comment on it. Instead, he pulled off his heavy buckskin coat and placed it gently around her shoulders. "It's slow going from here. I'd rather you not freeze." Willow froze, stunned. Nobody had ever offered her warmth for the sake of kindness. Her hands curled into the lining of the coat. "It's heavy." Matthias nodded. "Warm things usually are." They continued down the trail, the wind easing as the trees closed in around them. After some minutes of quiet walking, Willow attempted speech. "Why did you come up here today? Most people don't wander near a cliff." Matthias's gaze drifted over the treetops. "I trapped game on this ridge. I was checking my line. That's when I saw you standing too close to the edge." "You didn't have to help me," Willow whispered. His answer was immediate. "Yes, I did." As twilight deepened, Matthias led her toward a flat clearing where a small fire pit was ringed by stones. "We'll rest here," he said gently. "The trail gets steeper beyond this point." Willow sank to the ground, exhausted, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Matthias knelt and gathered tinder, his movements practiced and quiet. With a few strikes of flint, sparks leapt to life, catching on the dry needles. Soon, a small fire cracked open the cold. Willow held out her hands, letting the warmth seep into her bones. "I didn't think I'd ever feel warm again." Matthias glanced at her. "You will, more than you know." He offered her a piece of flatbread from his pack. Willow hesitated, glancing down at her body as if ashamed to eat in front of him. He noticed. "Food isn't a sin," Matthias said softly, "and no one here will mock you for it." Her eyes stung. Slowly, she accepted the bread. They ate in silence for a while, listening to the wind shift through the pines. The fire's glow softened Matthias's features, revealing faint scars along its jaw. Silent stories she didn't know yet. Willow found herself staring, not because he was imposing, but because he looked safe. When she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "What if I can't do this?" "Do what?" he asked. "Live," she said. "Start over. Be someone worth anything." Matthias leaned back on his hands, thinking, "No one is born knowing how to start over. You learn, day by day, step by step." He paused, then added, "You already took the hardest step today. You chose to stay." Willow's breath wavered. "But what if I'm too broken?" Matthias's voice softened to something almost reverent. "The strongest trees are the ones that survive the storm. Broken doesn't mean ruined. It means you endured." She stared into the flames, letting his words settle in a place inside her that hadn't been touched by hope in years. When the fire died down to embers, Matthias stood. "We should keep moving before it turns dark." The descent became steeper, and Willow stumbled more than once. Each time, Matthias steadied her without a word. Once, when her foot slipped on loose gravel, she gasped and reached out instinctively. His hand caught hers, firm and warm. "You're all right," he murmured. "Lean on me if you need to." She didn't let go for several minutes. When they reached the base of the ridge, a narrow path wound deeper into the woods. Matthias gestured ahead. "My cabin's about half an hour from here." Willow hesitated. "Are you sure you want someone like me there?" Matthias turned, and in the dim light, his expression softened into something she couldn't decipher, but it made her chest ache. "I wouldn't have offered if I didn't mean it," he said. "You're not a burden, Willow. You're someone who deserves a chance to be treated kindly." Her throat tightened, and she looked away before emotion spilled over. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not letting me die." Matthias shook his head gently. "No, thank you for choosing to live." For the first time since childhood, Willow walked toward something instead of away from it, toward the unknown, toward a future, toward a man who saw her not as weight, not as shame, but as someone worth reaching for on the edge of a cliff. Matthias's cabin appeared just as the last strips of sunlight faded behind the pines. Willow expected something intimidating or wild, a mountain man's shelter carved from loneliness and grief. But the small log house tucked beside a bend in the creek looked unexpectedly gentle. Smoke curled from the stone chimney. A wooden chair sat on the porch. Wind chimes made from antlers clicked softly in the dusk. "It's not much," Matthias said as he pushed open the door, "but it's safe." The warmth struck her first. A soft, steady heat radiated from a stone hearth. Dried herbs hung from the beams, sage, mint, lavender. A table built by hand stood near the window. A woven rug lay beneath it, worn by years of bootsteps. On one side of the cabin, a bed of pine boughs and wool blankets was neatly arranged. On the other, a smaller room waited behind a simple door. Willow stepped inside as if crossing into holy ground. "This is beautiful," she whispered. Matthias smiled faintly. "It's been quiet for a long time. Could use some life again." He nodded to the small room. "That's yours. The lock works. I won't come in unless you ask." Willow blinked at him. "You mean I have my own space?" "Yes." "And I can lock the door?" "Of course." Her breath shook. In her old house, she'd never had a lock, never had privacy, never had freedom from footsteps charging down the hall. Matthias paused, suddenly concerned. "Is something wrong?" "No," she said quickly, wiping her eyes. "It's just new." He nodded, as if he understood completely. "Take your time." She opened the door to her room and froze. Inside was a small bed covered in a patchwork quilt. A window looked over the creek, where moonlight danced on the water's surface. A shelf held folded blankets. It wasn't grand, but it was safe. It was hers. She pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by something she had no words for. Matthias lingered behind her. "I'll make supper," he said softly. "You rest." But Willow didn't rest. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap, staring at the room as if afraid it would vanish. She didn't know how long she sat like that, but eventually the smell of stew drifted under the door, rich, savory, warm. Hunger tugged at her, and she stepped into the main room. Matthias ladled stew into a wooden bowl and placed it on the table. "Eat first," he said. "Talk later, if you want to." She approached the bowl slowly, conscious of every inch of her body. Eating around others had always meant ridicule, laughter, cruel comments from people who watched every bite. But Matthias simply sat across from her with his own bowl. He waited until she took the first bite before lifting his spoon. The stew was warm, filled with potatoes and carrots and bits of venison. Willow's eyes fluttered shut. "It's good," she whispered. Matthias smiled. "I'm glad." No judgment, no jokes about her appetite, just shared warmth. They ate quietly, the fire crackling between them. When the meal was done, Willow tried to stand and clear her bowl, but Matthias gently shook his head. "Sit. You've walked enough for one day." "You don't have to do everything," she murmured. "I know," he said, "but I want to." He washed the bowls while she sat by the hearth, drawn to the way its heat touched the numb parts of her heart. She didn't speak until Matthias sat across from her again, arms rested loosely on his knees. "Would you like to tell me more about what happened?" he asked, voice low. She swallowed hard. "My family? They never wanted me. They said I was the reason my mother died. They said my body was shameful. They said no man would ever love me. They said I should be grateful they let me stay." Matthias's jaw tightened, not at her, never at her, but at the cruelty she'd lived through. "You believed them," he said. "I still do sometimes," she whispered. Matthias leaned forward, voice steady. "Then let me say this clearly. They were wrong. Not just wrong. Cruel and wrong. Someone else's hatred doesn't define your worth." Willow's throat tightened. "Why are you so kind to me?" "Because you deserve it," he said simply. Silence settled between them, comfortable, warm, like a blanket placed gently on cold shoulders. After a while, Willow stood. "I should sleep." Matthias nodded, rising with her. "If you need anything, my door will stay open, but yours stays closed, locked, if that makes you feel safer." She swallowed. "It does." "Good." Before she stepped into her room, he said quietly, "Willow?" She turned. "I'm glad you're still here." Her breath hitched. I'm glad you found me." When Willow closed her door, she locked it, but not from fear of him. From the unfamiliar, overwhelming feeling of safety she didn't know how to manage yet. For the first time in years, she slept through the night. The next weeks unfolded with a rhythm she had never known. Matthias chopped firewood in the mornings while Willow made cornbread or stirred breakfast porridge. He let her eat first every time, pretending it was habit. But she noticed the way he hovered near the stove, waiting for her to finish before taking a plate for himself. He fixed the roof while she swept the porch, humming softly under her breath. He taught her how to plant mint near the creek, how to read animal tracks, how to mend rips in canvas. She learned to laugh again, small sounds at first, barely their smiles, until the dam inside her cracked open and real laughter spilled into the cabin. One afternoon, he placed a hand on her shoulder to guide her through splitting kindling. She froze, not in fear, but in shock. "Sorry," he murmured, stepping back at once. "Too close?" "No," she whispered. No one touches me gently, ever." Matthias's voice softened. "Then they were fools." Willow's cheeks warmed. She didn't look away, and something in Matthias's chest shifted, tightened, softened. It was subtle, but Willow felt it. Something was growing between them, slowly, carefully, like a scar healing into strength. Spring crept slowly into the mountains. Snow thinned on the ridge, the creek swelled with meltwater, and wildflowers pushed through the softening earth. Willow grew with the season, her cheeks warmer, her laughter easier, her steps steadier. The girl who had stood on the edge of a cliff now woke each morning with purpose. Yet beneath that growing strength, a quiet fear still trembled. That joy, this gentle, could not last. One morning, Matthias found her by the creek, kneeling in the grass as she planted rosemary and wild mint. The sun caught in her hair. For a moment, he simply watched her, something thoughtful, almost aching, passing across his face. "You're good with plants," he said finally. Willow smiled shyly. "I used to sneak into the neighbor's garden when I was a child. My stepmother hated it. She said a girl like me should spend less time kneeling in the dirt and more time learning how to make myself useful." Matthias crouched beside her. "You're useful just by being alive, Willow." She swallowed. His voice held no flattery, no attempt to soothe, just truth. But she also sensed there was something he wasn't saying, something heavy behind his eyes. It grew more obvious over the next days, a hesitation in his movements, a distant look when he thought she wasn't watching. Willow saw these things, the way someone who's lived with pain always notices when someone else carries it too. One evening, after supper, she approached him by the fireplace. "Matthias, something's been bothering you." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared into the flames, every flicker reflected in the scars along his knuckles. "You're not wrong," he said softly. She waited. He exhaled slowly. "There are things you don't know, things I never intended to tell anyone, but I think you deserve to hear them." He sat heavily in the chair across from her. The fire filled the silence between them. 5 years ago, before the sickness took my family, I wasn't living up here. I was living in a town south of the ridge. I was a blacksmith, tired but happy. He smiled faintly. "My wife, Lila, she was quiet like you. And my son, Finn, he laughed more than anyone I've ever met." Willow's heart tightened. She had sensed this wound in him from the beginning. "When the fever swept through the valley," he continued, "I tried everything. I hunted herbs, boiled roots, carried them to every house. But nothing stopped it. Lila died first. Finn a week later." Willow reached for his hand without thinking. He let her. "After that," he said hoarsely, "people wanted someone to blame. There were whispers that I'd brought the sickness from the mountains. Someone accused me of poisoning the well." His jaw tightened. "A lie. But fear makes men cruel. A mob formed. They burned my shop. They chased me north. I barely escaped." Willow covered her mouth. "Matthias." "I didn't fight back," he said. "I didn't have anything left worth fighting for." Silence filled the cabin like a fog. Willow squeezed his hand gently. "You didn't deserve that." He looked up at her, eyes pained. "And you didn't deserve what was done to you. We both survived things meant to break us." She nodded. "But we didn't break." "No," he whispered, "we didn't." For a moment she thought the shadows had finally lifted, but fate rarely lets peace settle for long. 2 weeks later, while Willow prepared stew, movement flickered between the trees, too sharp to be deer, too deliberate to be fox. She froze, ladle trembling in her hand. "Matthias?" she called softly. He stepped onto the porch with his rifle, eyes narrowing. "Stay inside." The cabin fell silent as tension coiled in the air. Willow peeked out the window just in time to see 3 men emerge from the pines. 2 carried rifles. 1 had a limp. They looked rough, angry, starved for trouble. "Cole!" the limping man shouted. "We know you're here!" Matthias stiffened. Willow's blood turned cold. "Who are they?" she whispered. Matthias didn't take his eyes off the intruders. Men from the town I fled, men who think they can rewrite the past if they destroy what's left of me. The leader sneered. You killed our kin with that sickness you spread. You owe the valley blood. Willow felt the floor tilt under her feet. This isn't fair. They can, and they will, Matthias said grimly, unless we stop them. The 3 men advanced, their boots crunching on the forest floor. Matthias stepped off the porch. Turn around and leave. The limping man spat. We came to finish what we started. Willow's voice cracked as she ran to the doorway. Stop! Please! All 3 turned toward her, her heart hammered at the hatred in their faces. There she is, one of them sneered. Another stray he picked up. What's wrong, girl? The mountain man not enough to keep you fed? Matthias's expression darkened like a storm about to break. You don't speak about her, he growled, stepping in front of Willow. The man laughed. Look at you, Cole, protecting a fat little... Before he could finish, Matthias's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Chaos erupted. Willow screamed his name as the other 2 men lunged. Matthias fought brutally, efficiently. His grief and rage honed into something sharp. But he was outnumbered, and the fight dragged them dangerously close to the riverbank. And then, in a single sickening moment, Matthias slipped on the wet stones, and one of the men slammed a rifle butt into his temple. Matthias collapsed. Willow's world shattered. No, she cried, running toward him, but hands grabbed her arms, dragging her backward. Let's take her, one of them snarled. He'll break when he wakes and sees what he's lost. Willow kicked, screamed, clawed, but they dragged her toward the trees, shouting threats she barely heard over the pounding in her ears. Matthias lay unconscious beside the river, still, fragile, terrifyingly pale. Willow was being pulled back into the darkness she thought she'd escaped forever. Her chest heaved, her fear blazed into something fierce and unfamiliar. Not again, not this time. Her voice tore from her throat, a scream of defiance she never knew she had. Let me go! And for the first time in her life, Willow fought not to survive the day, but to protect the man who had saved her life. Willow's scream raked the air like the cry of a wounded animal, raw and trembling, but filled with something that startled even the men dragging her. Fury. Not the frightened, shrinking protests of a girl beaten down by life, but a roar torn from deep inside a woman who had finally learned what it meant to have something worth fighting for. Shut up, one of the men snarled, jerking her arm so hard she stumbled, but she didn't fall. Willow dug her heels into the earth, twisting her body with all the strength she had. Pain flared along her shoulders, but she pushed through it. A lifetime of being beaten had built something inside her, a quiet endurance that now surged into something powerful. You won't take me, she shouted. The second man, bigger, red-faced, mean-eyed, grabbed her hair. You think you can fight us, girl? We'll drag you... He didn't finish. Willow's knee shot upward, slamming into his thigh. It wasn't where she'd aimed. Fear made her clumsy, but it was enough to stagger him. She wrenched free for one precious second. She ran. Branches clawed at her arms as she scrambled toward Matthias's motionless body. Matthias! Wake up! She cried, falling to her knees beside him. He didn't move. She pressed her hand to his cheek, then to his chest. Relief flooded her. He was breathing, shallow, but steady. Behind her, boots thundered across the earth. Grab the girl! Willow spun around, heart hammering. Stay away from him! The limping man smirked. Or what? You think you can stop us? Willow grabbed the only thing near her hand, a thick fallen branch. Her hand shook, but she raised it like a club. "I won't let you hurt him," she whispered, voice trembling but fierce. The men laughed, and then a sound cut through the river's roar, a low, pained groan. Matthias rolled onto his side, blood sliding down his temple. His vision blurred, but he saw Willow standing between him and danger, shaking, terrified, but refusing to move. "Willow," his voice was hoarse, "get back." "No," she said, not taking her eyes off the attackers. "They hurt you. They won't touch you again." The men lunged. Willow swung the branch with all her strength. It connected with a sickening crack against one man's shoulder. He cried out, dropping his rifle. "You little—" He reached for her, rage burning in his eyes. But he never reached her. Matthias was on his feet, barely steady, swaying like a wounded bull, but moving. He surged forward with a roar, slamming into the man who had grabbed Willow. They tumbled to the ground. Matthias fought with the desperation of someone who had already lost everything once and would not lose again. "You don't touch her!" Matthias snarled, his fists slamming into the man's jaw. The second attacker charged at Willow again. She swung her branch, but he was faster. He grabbed her wrist, twisting hard. Willow screamed. "Let her go!" Matthias bellowed. The man didn't listen until Matthias tackled him from the side, ripping him away. They crashed into the mud, fists flying. Willow stumbled back, clutching her wrist. The limping man, the leader, raised his rifle, not at Matthias, but at Willow. "You want to protect her?" he hissed. "Watch her die." Willow froze. Matthias didn't. He lunged, ramming his shoulder into the man's back just as the rifle fired. The shot missed Willow by inches, splintering a tree trunk behind her. The leader fell, dropping the weapon. Matthias grabbed him by the collar, fury crackling through every muscle. "You tried to kill her," Matthias growled. "You tried to take the only good thing I have left." Terror flickered in the man's eyes. "Cole, wait." But Matthias didn't strike. He stopped, chest heaving, fists trembling, but he stopped, because Willow's hands were on his back, her voice soft but steady. "Matthias," she whispered, "if you kill him, they'll say they were right about you. Don't let them take any more of your life." Matthias closed his eyes, and slowly, painfully, he released the man. He stepped back. Willow slipped her arms around him, helping him stand straight. His weight leaned into her, but she held firm, stronger than she ever believed she could be. Behind them, the two conscious attackers scrambled to their feet and fled into the trees, dragging the unconscious third man with them. Matthias sagged against Willow's shoulder. "You saved me," he murmured. Willow shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "No, you saved me first. I just finally learned how to save myself, too." He touched her cheek gently. "You're stronger than you know." "And I'm not letting you face anything alone," she whispered. Their foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling everything around them, fear, pain, danger, falling quiet. They had survived. Together. The cabin glowed like a lantern against the deepening night, its windows spilling warm amber light into the clearing. Willow helped Matthias inside, one arm wrapped around his waist, guiding him gently but firmly. Every time he winced, she murmured, "Easy, I've got you," with a tenderness that made something deep inside him loosen. She settled him onto the wooden chair closest to the fire. The flames crackled softly, throwing flickers of gold across his tired face. Willow knelt in front of him, her hands trembling as she dabbed the dried blood from his brow with a warm cloth. "You should lie down," she whispered. Matthias shook his head. "Not until I know you're all right." Willow let out a shaky breath. After everything, the cliff, the riverbank, the fight, no one would have blamed her for collapsing. Instead, she lifted his hand to her cheek, holding it there like an anchor. "I'm all right," she said softly, "because you came for me, because you didn't let me go." His thumb brushed away a tear rolling down her skin. "I'll never let you go, Willow, not unless you ask me to." A silence settled, but it wasn't heavy. It was soft, new, like a blanket woven from the first threads of a future neither of them had expected to want. Willow sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I didn't think anyone would ever fight for me," she said quietly. "Not once in my whole life." Matthias rested his cheek against her hair. "Then let me be the first of many days where someone does." The fire crackled again, whispering warmth across the room. Willow's voice was barely a breath. "I almost died today, but I've never felt more alive than I do right now." Matthias turned his head slightly, pressing a soft kiss to the crown of her hair. "You chose life, Willow. That wasn't me. That was you." She closed her eyes, letting his words sink into every hollow place inside her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Matthias whispered. "But being scared together is different from being scared alone." Another pause, this one sweeter, gentler. Willow raised her head, meeting his gaze. The firelight painted his eyes in shades of amber and gold, and she suddenly understood why she hadn't jumped. Because life had been waiting, because he had been waiting. "Matthias," she whispered. "Yes? Is it really okay if I stay? Here, with you?" He didn't hesitate. "This is your home now," he said, voice quiet but sure. "If you'll have it." Tears filled her eyes again, but for the first time they weren't born from pain. She nodded, resting her forehead against his. "I want to stay, more than anything." His hand slid around hers, fingers lacing. "Then you're safe here, with me." Outside the cabin the wind softened, the pines swayed gently, and the night folded around them like a blessing. Inside, two people who had once stood on opposite edges of loss now sat close enough that their hearts beat in the same fragile rhythm. Not healed, not whole, but no longer alone. Thank you for staying with Willow and Matthias through every step of their journey, from the edge of a cliff to the warmth of a cabin where hope finally took root. Stories like theirs remind us that even when life feels unbearably heavy, one moment of kindness can change an entire future. I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? Your comments remind me that no matter the distance between us, stories tie our hearts together. And if you still believe in second chances and love that heals, stay close. The next story is waiting for you.